You know, in Dungeons and Dragons, we deal with many wild and crazy creatures, and sometimes we forget one of the worst creatures known in our world, that being humanoids themselves. Some people say the richest ones are typically the worst offenders. Personally, I think the worst ones are anyone who brings in 20 lottery tickets at a time to get checked while you're waiting to pay for gas, but that's just me. And so, hello, my name is Matt, and welcome to my hidden nerdy side, and today, we're building a noble encounter in D&D 5e. Now, normally, this would be the part of our video where we break down the lore and mechanics of our subject. However, noble is such a broad term, and the official noble stat block is not only nothing to write home about, but something you'll easily rewrite to suit your needs. And what really makes nobles shine is their minds and how you, as a dungeon master, roleplay them. So instead, let's break down common noble tropes and themes we can integrate into our encounter. Well, to start, nobles are obviously much richer than the typical person and have a higher status, which means they are more powerful. Now, this doesn't necessarily translate to physical or magical strength, although it certainly can, but their power really comes in the form of influence. That's the key. Because of the money they possess, the titles they claim, the relationships they have, and the land and businesses they own, they can make things happen that regular day folks simply can't. For example, if regular people want a monumental change, a common trope is they form a revolution and fight back against the oppressive system. But nobles can easily work within the system and simply bargain favors or riches in exchange for a change that would take 1,000 peasants with pitchforks to barely accomplish. Another thing to take into consideration is since nobles have status and wealth, lots of their dirty work doesn't have to be performed by themselves because they can simply hire others to do it. So think about types of minions that would suit your nobles and why they would use them in particular. And hey, we're all looking for spicy minion ideas, so toss yours in the comments below so we can all learn and enjoy. But what makes a great noble is their motivation. However, a noble's motivation can differ greatly from the average person. For example, a poor citizen might be motivated by hunger, whereas a noble would never have such a problem. Instead, they might be motivated to maximize profit, which could easily clash with the motivations of many others and could even lead to the poor citizen's hunger problem. However, this doesn't mean nobles and regular citizens can never share the same motivations. For example, avenging a lost loved one is not a motivation limited by class, and a motivation that can apply to a wide variety of people is a great way to humanize your noble. And finally, because of their status and wealth, encounters using nobles will be heavier on roleplay and will be played on a higher level that can lead to real-world consequences. For if a noble's plan is a success, it can affect your world on the bigger political stage. And in contrast, if a noble who's in charge of something is taken out, well, what does or doesn't happen as a result, or who will possibly take their place? Who knows? Only time will tell. Now, that doesn't mean there will be zero combat, since nobles do have minions your players can take on. But combat with the nobles themselves will be less common and most likely would be the climax of an encounter, if you even decide to have it at all. But anyways, let's build your next noble encounter. This encounter / quest will last about 2 to 4 sessions depending on how long you want to stretch it out. And as for the level it could be used at, we're actually going to skip that portion because it will heavily depend on the types of minions you decide to give your nobles. So instead, we're going to focus on the roleplay and political aspect and craft it in a way so it can be run at any level. The party's motivation should always be tailored to your campaign, but for simplicity's sake, we'll say your players need something that only a noble can provide, possibly access to a certain part of a city, a royal deed to some property, or whatever else you can think of. But what's important to note for our particular encounter is whatever your players are after should be possible through the efforts of not just one noble exclusively, giving your players the freedom to choose which noble they align themselves with. So anyways, let's get rolling. So when planning a political questline, we need to determine who are our key players, what are their objectives, why do they want to achieve their objectives, what big political moves can they make, how can they make them, why are they making those moves in particular, and what are the conflicts and results they will create involving the key NPCs and player characters in our questline. Now, a massive mistake mistake I see many DMs make is what I call clown carring, which is cramming way too many key players into our political plot, leading to things getting overcomplicated and messy. Sure, it can be nice having extra people if you can pull it off, but I find it's much better for you and your players if you just have a few people who are truly relevant to the story. This makes things much easier to track for your players and yourself, and it allows you to truly develop personalities for our key NPCs so there's a genuine difference between them. So we'll keep it simple and stick to 3 main nobles, who will be an elf named Aymar, a dwarf named Obun, and a dragonborn named Zara. But before we dive into how they all play into this, we need a point of contention, otherwise known as the reason why our 3 nobles will be butting heads. So a noble named Castor was murdered, and the authorities are still trying to figure out what happened. But what's even more pressing in the eyes of our nobles is because Castor had no heirs, his land will be passed on to a different noble family within the next 30 days. And the 3 main candidates for receiving this generous donation of land are Aymar, Obun, and Zara, also known as the king's favorite nobles. However, not only is this land large and fruitful, but a very popular trading post where tons of trade funnels exists within it, making it even more valuable. And achieving this land will be the prime motivation for all our nobles and what ultimately causes conflict between them. Now, your players will hear about all of this when they attend a party full of nobles, and the announcement will be made public. How they get invited to this party is up to you, but let's say an NPC they once helped got them an invitation. This NPC will also point out our 3 main nobles as prime candidates for your players to talk to, because they have so much power and influence and could easily help your players, which will get this quest rolling. Now, whether your players talk to only one of them or all of them doesn't really matter too much, because each one of them will have some tasks for your players to perform in order to gain their help. But before that, let's quickly go over our nobles and what differentiates them. We'll say Aymar is a cunning magical component dealer who can procure some of the world's rarest material components. She will be known for her ruthless business practices and her outrageous good looks. Obun will be a metal worker who makes some of the most popular weapons, armor, and metal accessories in your world. He will also be known for loving to drink and being quite blunt with his words. And finally, Zara will be a dealer of leathers and fabrics, fashioning some of the finest tailored outfits in the known world, and they will be very flamboyant and smooth with their words. You can feel free to change this up as you like. This is just to help you get a sense of how to make them 3 separate people. Now, before they ask your players to do anything, your players are going to have to get the nobles to trust them, since some of what they'll be asking your players to do won't exactly be legal. So make sure your players are prepped by an NPC friend or in some other way beforehand so they can get ready to kiss some ass. But anyways, let's start with Obun, since he is the most straightforward option. After speaking with Obun and gaining his trust, he will ask your players to essentially help him make fools of Aymar and Zara, hoping it will make the king favor Obun. How is this possible? Well, Zara's company makes all the king's clothing, and Aymar provides the components to make his medicine. So Obun wants your players to break into Aymar's laboratory and swap out his medicine with something that will give him hives. Obun then wants your players to break into Zara's workshop and replace a dye that will be used on the king's robe with a dye that will run and wash away after a few days. Neither of these acts will do serious harm to the king, but it will make him annoyed with Aymar and Zara, giving Obun an advantage. So plan as intricate or as simple of a heist as you like. Just make sure there are enough identifying markers in each location so your players know where to go. For example, the king's medicine could have a royal seal on top of it, and the king's robe could be on a gorgeous display. Next, let's move on to Aymar, or Aymar. It doesn't matter. Upon gaining her trust, Aymar will ask your players to deliver a few packages in exchange for her aid. And That's it. It will seem like a really simple task, and it actually will be. One package will be delivered to Aymar's estate, one will be delivered to Obun's, and one will be delivered to Zara's. However, what will be odd is each package will have 0 identifying markings on it other than who it's addressed to, which will be Aymar, Obun, and Zara. Also, each package will be magical if your players use means to detect it, and Aymar will make it clear that she doesn't want to be associated with these packages at all, so the delivery should be made anonymously. So this task will be simple enough. However, after visiting Aymar to collect payment, she says she will provide your players with it the following morning and offer to house your players for the evening. And when your players wake up, they will hear news that Obun was killed by a magical bomb delivered to his residence. However, Zara got word of this and did not open their package, and the story will be Aymar heard the same. But of course, we now know Aymar had the package delivered to her place purely to throw off the scent, and will now blackmail your players into killing Zara. You see, the packages had no identifying markers or obvious ways for it to be tracked back to Aymar, but your players were the ones to deliver the packages and people witnessed them doing so. So Aymar will tell your players if they don't kill Zara, Aymar will have her spies alert the king it was your players who delivered the bombs. And if your players threaten to tell the king, Aymar will simply laugh and say, who do you think the king will believe? One of his favorite business partners or some random adventurers? So now your players have a decision to make. Do they fall under the pressure and kill Zara, or do they try to get back at Aymar somehow? It's gonna be their call. But finally, let's talk about Zara. Upon gaining their trust, Zara will tell your players they actually suspect either Aymar or Obun may have been the ones to kill Castor in the first place so they could get his land. However, she can't prove it. So Zara will give your players 2 options. Either they can find out who killed Castor and let Zara take the credit, making her look favorable in the king's eyes, or because the king really cares about what his citizens think, your party could simply spread rumors to create suspicion around Aymar and Obun, again making Zara look like the more loyal subject. If your players do go the rumor route, give them total free range to come up with as many stupid ways to spread rumors as they want, but have Zara talk it out with them so you can provide direction and assistance when necessary. But if your players go the investigative route, Zara will recommend they visit the coroner to take a look at Castor's body, and when they visit the coroner, he will say Castor was killed by a rare poisonous magical plant. Now, based on what we've already talked about, and based on the information your players know about our 3 main nobles, you're likely assuming this points to Aymar, and it does. But there is another way we can take this as well. You as the Dungeon Master know Aymar is capable of murder, and you can absolutely run it that way. However, if you want to get even saucier, you can have it so Obun is the killer and procured this poison in order to frame Aymar. And if you want to get even wackier than that, you can have it so Zara is actually the killer and is trying to pull off some weird double bluff, but you know, that's an acquired taste. If you want Aymar to be the killer, then you can have Zara say they need more evidence, and your players can either break into Aymar's laboratory to find more clues, bribe high-ranking people under her for more evidence, and on and on and on. But if Obun is the killer, you can have Aymar own reports of a break-in that occurred where supplies were stolen, which include the poisonous plant. Then also in this report, you can say what was left behind were traces of a shiny bluish-white powder known as zinc. If your players report this back to Zara, she will tell your players it's used to treat steel and iron in blacksmithing, which will then point to Obun, and you can repeat the previous process your players just performed with Aymar's lab at Obun's foundry. Now, if your players only talk to one of the nobles and make a deal, that's totally fine. But if they shop around to find the best deal, there are some unique and interesting interactions that can occur. For example, if your players speak to Zara and then go with Aymar, deliver the packages, and get blackmailed by her, well then they may go to Zara, tell them what's going on, and work with them to bring down Aymar. But no matter which path your players take, this will surely be an encounter your players will have a great time engaging with. So, a bunch of nobles backstabbing each other while your players do the dirty work? I think this is all quite spicy enough. But if we wanted to, how can we make it even spicier? Well, the first thing is to customize the professions and personalities of Aymar, Obun, and Zara to suit your specific world. Bomb makers, shipbuilders, spice merchants, and more could all add some wacky twists to the encounter. You could also have other groups the three nobles have hired trying to complete the task your players didn't agree to take, creating even more chaos when they eventually bump into your players. And finally, another way is to add additional nobles into the mix to create an even more intricate web of deception. But remember, only add nobles that genuinely add more to the encounter without overcomplicating it. But anyways, this is just one of many ways you can use nobles in your Dungeons & Dragons campaigns. But if you do use this in your future games, make sure to let me know how it goes. And of course, I'm always accepting challenges, so feel free to leave them below. Thanks for watching and indulging my hidden nerdy side.